The quiet hum of the bank came to a halt as an elderly black woman stood at the counter, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with frustration. Why was the teller refusing to serve her? Why were people in line staring but saying nothing? All she wanted was to withdraw her money, yet the sneering teller looked at her as if she were a criminal. "I need to see your ID again." The woman, Eleanor Davis, had already shown it twice. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice firm despite the humiliation creeping up her spine. The teller smirked. "People like you need extra verification." A hush spread through the room. People shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Was this happening? Was no one going to step in? Then, a deep voice broke the tension. "That's enough." Heads turned. A man in a leather jacket, standing tall with a familiar face, Vin Diesel. But what happened next? Did he stop the discrimination, or did the situation spiral even further? Watch the whole story to witness an unforgettable moment of justice. Never forget to like, share, and subscribe. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, an 82-year-old black woman, adjusted her glasses as she stepped into Crestview Bank's grand lobby. The polished marble floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the scent of fresh coffee from the nearby teller station filled the air. She clutched her worn leather purse tightly, inside which rested her late husband's pension check, her only means of survival. She had been banking here for years, but something felt different today. The young white teller at the counter glanced at her, then rolled her eyes before turning to whisper something to her colleague. Eleanor felt the sting of their judgment, but ignored it. With slow, careful steps, she approached the counter. "Good morning, dear. I want to deposit this check," she said, sliding it forward with a warm smile. The teller, whose name tag read Jennifer, barely glanced at it before scoffing. "Ma'am, are you sure this check is real?" Eleanor's smile faltered. "Of course, dear. It's my late husband's pension." Jennifer smirked. "We see a lot of questionable checks come through here. You people always—" Before she could finish, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" All heads turned toward the entrance. A tall, muscular figure in a fitted leather jacket stepped forward. The bank suddenly fell silent. Vin Diesel had just walked in. Eleanor's heart pounded as she turned to see the man standing behind her. The entire bank seemed to pause, the air thick with tension. Jennifer's smug expression faltered when she locked eyes with the unexpected visitor. Vin Diesel stepped forward, his commanding presence filling the room. His deep voice was calm, but it had an unmistakable edge. I asked, "What's the problem here?" Jennifer straightened, her confidence flickering. No problem, sir. We just have to verify large checks for fraud, especially when—" She hesitated, glancing at Eleanor before finishing. "When they look suspicious." Vin's jaw clenched. Suspicious? Because an elderly woman is trying to cash her check? His voice was firm, daring her to say something else. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I've been coming here for years, sir. Never had an issue before." Jennifer glanced at her co-workers, perhaps looking for backup, but no one wanted to get involved. Not with him standing there. "It's just policy," she muttered. Vin Diesel let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "No, it's discrimination, and we both know it." He turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, do you mind if I stay with you until this is sorted out?" Eleanor's eyes welled with gratitude. "I'd appreciate that, young man." Suddenly flustered, the entire bank watched as Jennifer scrambled to process the check. But something told Eleanor. This wasn't over yet. Jennifer's hands trembled slightly as she processed the check, her usual arrogance replaced with visible discomfort under Vin Diesel's piercing gaze. The other bank employees remained silent, stealing nervous glances as tension filled the air. Customers in line whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Eleanor, Vin, and the flustered teller. Eleanor's heart ached from years of enduring these moments, quiet humiliations, unspoken judgments. But today was different. Today, she had someone in her corner. Vin folded his arms. "So, Jennifer, how long does it take to verify one check?" "Seems like a pretty simple process." Jennifer cleared her throat. "It's standard procedure. We just have to, ensure..." "Ensure what?" Vin cut her off, his voice steady but firm. "That an elderly black woman isn't a fraud? That she doesn't belong here?" Jennifer's face burned red. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Vin pressed, leaning slightly forward. The room was silent. Eleanor watched as Jennifer struggled to answer, knowing deep down that this wasn't just about a check. It was about something more significant. The bank manager, a middle-aged man in a crisp suit, emerged from his office just then. His eyes widened at the sight of Vin Diesel. "Mr. Diesel, is there a problem here?" Vin turned to him. "Yeah, there is. Your teller is refusing to cash this woman's check. And from what I've seen, it has nothing to do with policy." The manager's eyes flicked to Jennifer, whose face was now drained of color. He sighed. "Ms. Carter, in my office. Now." Jennifer hesitated, then hurried away, her head down. Eleanor exhaled shakily. Was justice finally being served? Jennifer disappeared into the manager's office, the heavy glass door shutting behind her. The murmurs in the bank continued, with customers shaking their heads and exchanging knowing glances. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, just the first time someone as powerful as Vin Diesel had stepped in. Eleanor exhaled, her hands still gripping the counter, as if she needed to steady herself. The weight of years of quiet discrimination pressed against her chest. It wasn't just this one moment. It was every moment like it. The bank manager stepped out minutes later, his face tight with forced professionalism. Jennifer trailed behind him, her head down, her usual arrogance gone. The manager cleared his throat and straightened his tie. "Ms. Carter has assured me this was a misunderstanding, and we apologize for any inconvenience, ma'am." He turned to Eleanor, forcing a polite smile. Vin scoffed. "Inconvenience?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Your teller humiliated this woman in front of everyone. She didn't question a check. She questioned her right to exist in this space." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably, but Vin wasn't done. "This isn't about one mistake. It's about the fact that she thought she could do this and get away with it. How many other people has she done this to when no one was here to call her out?" The tension in the room was suffocating. The manager looked around nervously, realizing more eyes were on him than he liked. His power, in this moment, meant nothing. He sighed, turning back to Eleanor. "I assure you, Ms. Robinson, we take this very seriously. Jennifer will face the consequences." Eleanor looked between them, her voice calm but firm. "Consequences? Does that mean she'll lose her job? Or just get a quiet warning so she can do this again next week?" Jennifer's head shot up, her face flashing with fear for the first time. The bank manager hesitated, and that was all the answer Eleanor needed. Vin shook his head. Pathetic. Then he turned to Eleanor. "You don't deserve this. Let's get out of here." As he guided her toward the exit, the entire bank watched, some ashamed, some secretly proud that someone had finally spoken up. But Eleanor knew this wasn't the end. It never was. As Eleanor and Vin Diesel stepped out of the bank, the fresh air hit her like a wave of relief. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. She had spent her whole life being told to let things go, to walk away and keep her dignity intact. But dignity wasn't silence. Dignity was standing up. She stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at Vin. "Thank you for what you did in there. But this doesn't change what happens when you're not around." Vin nodded, understanding. "Then let's make sure this doesn't get buried." A small crowd had gathered outside, customers from the bank, a few people who had overheard what happened, and even a young woman holding up her phone, recording. Vin turned to the onlookers, his voice steady but commanding. "This is the kind of thing people pretend doesn't happen. But it does. Every day. To people like Eleanor, who have worked hard their whole lives, only to be treated like criminals when they try to access their own money." The murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The young woman recording stepped forward. "I got everything on camera. The way that teller treated her, the way the manager just brushed it off. This needs to go online." Vin glanced at Eleanor. "Are you okay with that?" She hesitated. She had never been one for attention, never wanted to be the center of a controversy. But then she thought of all the times she had been treated this way, all the times she had let it go. She lifted her chin. "Post it." The video was uploaded within minutes. The title alone sent a shockwave through the internet. "Bank teller humiliates elderly black woman. Vin Diesel steps in." And just like that, the world was watching. When Eleanor got home that evening, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She wasn't tech-savvy, but even she could tell something big was happening. The young woman who posted the video had sent her a message. "It's gone viral. Millions of views in just hours." Eleanor sat down, her hands trembling slightly. She never expected her humiliation to become a public spectacle. But as she scrolled through the comments, she saw something unexpected. "This is disgusting. How many times does this happen when cameras aren't rolling? Banks need to be held accountable for racial discrimination. Fire that teller. Vin Diesel is a real one for stepping in. But why should he even have to?" Her story wasn't just being heard. It was igniting a movement. Then, her landline rang. "Eleanor, turn on the news," her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, said breathlessly. She fumbled for the remote and flipped to the local news station. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Bank under fire for racial profiling incident. Actor Vin Diesel speaks out." The footage from the bank played, followed by a clip of Vin speaking to reporters outside his hotel. This isn't just about Eleanor. It's about the countless people who experience this kind of discrimination daily. No one should need a celebrity to stand up for them to be treated with basic respect. Eleanor felt tears prick in her eyes. This wasn't just about her anymore. And then, the biggest shock came. Her phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Eleanor Davis? This is Daniel Reynolds, the CEO of First Trust Bank. I'd like to personally apologize, and if you're willing, I'd like to meet with you to discuss how we can make things right." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The CEO of the bank? This wasn't just an apology. This was a reckoning. Eleanor sat in the bank's executive office, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding. Across from her sat Daniel Reynolds, the CEO of First Trust Bank, looking visibly uncomfortable. Next to him, The bank manager and the now infamous teller, Jessica, sat with stiff postures, their gazes lowered. "I want to start by offering my deepest apologies, Mrs. Davis," Reynolds said, his voice careful. "What happened to you was unacceptable. I take full responsibility." Eleanor studied him, searching for sincerity. "I appreciate that, but an apology isn't enough. How many people have gone through what I did but didn't have a celebrity to step in for them?" The CEO sighed, nodding. "You're right. That's why we're taking action." He gestured to a folder on the desk. "Effective immediately, we launch mandatory racial bias training for all employees. Additionally, we're donating $500,000 to organizations that promote financial literacy in Black communities." Eleanor's eyes widened. This was more than she expected. "And what about Jessica?" she asked, her gaze locking onto the young woman who had humiliated her. Jessica swallowed hard. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Davis. I wasn't thinking. I let my biases get in the way of doing my job." Her voice cracked. "I never thought about how much damage I could cause. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm learning from this." Eleanor studied the woman's remorseful expression. The anger she had carried for days softened, not forgotten, but no longer weighing her down. "I can't speak for every Black woman who's been disrespected in a bank," Eleanor said slowly, "but I accept your apology. I hope you truly change." Jessica nodded, eyes brimming with tears. As Eleanor stepped out of the bank, a crowd of reporters surrounded her. Cameras flashed, and microphones were shoved toward her. "Mrs. Davis, do you think the bank's actions are enough? What do you say to the people still demanding justice?" Then, through the crowd, a familiar deep voice called out, "Eleanor!" She turned to see Vin Diesel standing by his car with a proud smile. "Looks like you started something big," he said, walking up to her. Eleanor chuckled, shaking her head. "I didn't start it. The world just finally decided to listen." Vin grinned. "And they won't stop listening now." As Eleanor looked around, at the cameras, the people watching, the changes already in motion, she realized something. She had walked into that bank as just another elderly Black woman, but now she had become a symbol, a voice, a force to be reckoned with. And that, she thought, was worth more than any apology. Enjoyed this story? Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Let's spread the message of hope and unity together. Thanks, and take care.